Your Kubernetes cluster is insecure. No, like, really insecure. Take a look at this list of vulnerabilities that I found in my cluster. Hundreds of compliance and configuration issues, as well as vulnerabilities in the containers that I'm running. Now, the good news is we have a way of finding and detecting these issues in our Kubernetes cluster using a tool known as Kubescape. Now, if you don't know what Kubescape is, basically, it's a free-to-use, open-source tool that you can use to run scans on your cluster. But not only that, you can actually use it to run scans on your code repositories and your image registries. And this is really important when you're in the DevOps, security, or just Kubernetes realm in general. So in this video, I'm going to go over everything you need to know to get started with the tool Kubescape. And I'm also going to go over the ARMO platform, which is the Saas solution that Kubescape can integrate with. Now, this video is quite long. It's actually quite a lot longer than I intended, but that's because I go over a lot of the cool features that I really like with Kubescape, as well as the ARMO platform. So I'm going to add chapters to this video and just use the chapters to find the sections that you're interested in. I go over everything from using the Kubescape CLI, how you can use it to scan your Kubernetes cluster, scan your YAML files, as well as integrating it with Github Actions to automatically scan your manifests anytime you make a change to them. I also go over how you can set up registry scanning, as well as visualize everything using the ARMO platform, and a couple other features that you can do in the ARMO platform as well. One quick disclosure is this video is sponsored by the ARMO team. Their product is free to use if you're running a cluster that has 10 or less nodes. So everything I did in this video was completely free, but just wanted to get it out there that this is a paid video, and I wanted to thank them for sponsoring a creator like myself. Now, the best way to actually learn Kubescape is to see it in action. So let's go ahead and jump into the video. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with the Kubescape CLI. So if you haven't already, you can install the Kubescape CLI using the custom installation script, or you can use Homebrew. I'll make sure to give a link in the description below for instructions on how to get it installed, as well as some of these commands that I'm running here. So I'm going to run the first command, which is just the Kubescape scan command. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to reach out to my Kubernetes cluster and it's going to scan it for vulnerabilities and compliance issues. And you can see that it returns a very long list of compliance issues and vulnerabilities on my Kubernetes cluster. Some of these scores are looking pretty good, but a lot of them are pretty low. But to go over this a little further, it has the severity, it has the control name, and how many of our resources failed this actual compliance issue, and then it gives us a score. So we're going to learn a lot about this as we go on with the video. One thing I want to mention here is when you just run the scan command, it runs it against all the different compliance frameworks. So there's a lot of different compliance frameworks out there. By default, they give you access to the NSA compliance framework as well as the MITRE framework. Now, if you want to run a scan specific to a certain framework, all you need to do is rerun that scan command, but then you can specify the actual framework. So I'm going to specify the NSA framework, and you can see that the list that it returns is a lot smaller than the one we had previously. And this is because it's only checking for compliance issues and vulnerabilities that are part of the NSA framework. We also have the ability to create our own frameworks, and that's going to be something that I show you later in the video. And we can actually create our own controls as well. And we can actually create them using a GPT-enabled tool. So I'll show you how to do that later on in the video. Now, to go back to this, we can see that we are getting a resource summary, and our combined compliance score is 58.30%. So I'm getting flashbacks to my high school report card. This is a pretty low score. Now, one thing you can do with this compliance score, as well as with the severities, is you can make your CI/CD pipelines actually fail if a certain severity comes up, or if a compliance score isn't reached. So we could set a threshold for, say, around 80%, and if our compliance score was lower than 80% or had any critical vulnerabilities, Kubescape could actually fail our pipeline. So that's one thing that Kubescape can be used for that I'll show as well later on in the video. I'll show you how to set this up in Github Actions to automatically run Kubescape as a GitHub action whenever you commit code to a repository. But before we get into the actual pipelines, I want to show off a few more Kubescape scan commands. So I'm going to go into my other window here, and in this window you can see I have a deployment.yaml file. So one thing I can do is I can actually scan all the YAML files in my directory. So I can go Kubescape scan, and then I can do a wildcard, so I'll just do star.yaml. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to read all the YAML files in my directory, and it's going to scan them for compliance issues. So you can see here that we have 65 controls in place for our actual deployment YAML file, and 11 of them failed and 50 of them pass. And it gives you a summary of what those controls are. So having a look here, we have a high severity for resource limits. And if you know what a resource limit is in Kubernetes, basically it's a way of limiting the amount of memory and CPU your pod is going to consume. So this is a really important parameter that you're going to want to put on all your deployments, so it makes sense that this is a control that Kubescape can look for. Having a look through a couple of other these ones, you can see that they're just sort of your general best practices, not running root containers, not allowing privileged escalation, some Linux hardening. So these are just various things that you may want to fix. So that's how you can look at YAML files in your local directory. Let's have a look at how you can scan an actual repository on something like GitHub. So I'm going to go into another window here, and I have a command ready, and it's our Kubescape scan command, but this time I'm specifying one of my GitHub directories, and I'm setting an additional flag here for compliance threshold. And basically what this says is I want my compliance threshold to be at least 90%, otherwise return back false. And this is one of the ways that you could integrate Kubescape into your CI/CD pipeline to actually fail the pipeline if the compliance score isn't met. So you can see at the very bottom, since our compliance score is 76.92%, it returns back a failed state. So if this was a pipeline, it would make it fail. All right, so we had a quick look at Kubescape from the CLI perspective. Let's now have a look at how Kubescape can integrate with the ARMO platform. All right, so we are currently in the ARMO platform right now, and as you can see, I have two clusters set up, and it's actually really quite simple to get your clusters connected to the ARMO platform. You can do it directly with the ARMO CLI and just specifying your account number, or you can actually install the Kubescape operator into your Kubernetes cluster using a Helm chart, and that's the way I did it. I'll go ahead and show you how you can do that as well. If you're logging in for the first time, I believe it's just going to give you a pop-up of how to install the Helm chart, and you just copy and paste it, and that's all you really need to do to get Kubescape installed into your cluster. So it's really simple to get it set up. Let's go over the left-hand side, all the different features that are currently available on the ARMO platform. There's going to be more in the future. They're constantly developing new features, but what's available right now is this simple dashboard view, which gives you the configuration risk and vulnerability risk over time. So it's a nice high-level overview. We then have the compliance section. So with the compliance section, this is how compliant your clusters actually are. So I talked about those different frameworks, like the National Security Association framework, and this is a standard framework that the National Security Association gave out on how to secure Kubernetes clusters. So it's a good one to follow, but a lot of those requirements are actually pretty hard to meet for normal day-to-day use Kubernetes clusters. So one thing I like to do is create my own frameworks, and I'll show you how you can do that. The next thing we have is vulnerabilities, and this is going to be all the different vulnerabilities inside your cluster. So this is things like the actual images that your pods are running. So if there's any vulnerabilities on those images that the pods are running, it's going to show up here. After that, we have the RBAC Visualizer. This is just a way to visualize all the different accounts that you have in Kubernetes and sort of give a high-level overview of how everything is connected together. So we'll go through that. At the bottom here, we have repository scanning and registry scanning, and these are actually really great features that you should be implementing into your security stack. This is going to actively scan your GitHub repositories as well as any image registries that you want to scan as well. Now, the last thing is the settings at the bottom, and this is where you can actually configure or remove clusters, set up your own different frameworks, controls, and integrate with third-party applications like Slack or Jenkins. So a lot of different things underneath the settings. Later on in the video, I'll go over the most important ones. So before we get there, let's head on over to the compliance section. And here you can see my two different clusters. So I have the K3S one, as well as the production cluster that I was talking about in Amazon EKS. And it gives us a summary report here of all the different failures. So if I want to go into a specific cluster, I can just click one of these here, and I now have a list of all the compliance issues. Now, this list is very similar to what we were looking at before when we were using the Kubescape CLI to actually scan our cluster. But what the ARMO platform is doing is it's giving us better visualization, it's recording the data, and it allows us to sort through the data and actually work with these issues on a platform. So if we go ahead and look at any of these different things, I can hop into this first high severity one where it's saying application credentials in the configuration file. And you can see out of the 88 resources on my cluster, 4 are failing this check, and one of them is already ignored. So if I want to actually action this, what I can do is I can hit this fix button, and what I'll be presented with is the different objects that are not compliant with this control. So you can see that I have a couple configuration maps and 2 jobs that are violating this control. So one thing you can do is, if you want, and you know this is not an issue, is you can actually ignore this check. So the next time you run the scan, it will no longer trigger it. So if I want to ignore it for this Argo CD configuration map, I can hit ignore, and I can enter in the reason. I can set an expiration date on the ignore, or if I just leave it as nothing, then this ignore will never expire. I also have the ability to change the scope of this. So right now it's scoped down to a specific cluster in a specific namespace on a specific resource. But what I could do is I could actually scope this against all my clusters. So if I wanted to change it to be a part of all my clusters, I could do that right here. And that way it's going to ignore this specific configuration violation on both my prod cluster as well as my lab cluster. You can do the same with the namespace as well as the actual resource. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save on the ignore here. Now, the other option that you have, instead of ignoring the problem, like I do with most of my problems, is you can actually fix the problem. And the way you do that is you click this fix button, and it's going to bring you into a new window. Now, to view this, I'm actually going to go back a level, and I have a more interesting problem for us to actually fix. So let's go ahead and add a different framework here. Right now, I'm just honed in on this specific framework, but I want to go into this NSA framework and show the violations on this one. So I'll just click on this, and now I have some different violations here, and this is the one that I'm interested in fixing. So this resource limits problem is a problem on a lot of clusters because a lot of people don't set the resource limits on their deployments and their pods. So this is an easy fix that a lot of people can understand. So if I go ahead and hit this fix button, you can see all the different deployments and stateful sets that are violating this. So I can basically scroll down and go to anything, but let's just pick this first one, which is my Argo CD repo server, and I'll go ahead and hit fix. Now, if we have a look here, ARMO actually tells us what the fix is going to be in our YAML manifest file. So it presents us our current YAML manifest file, and it says there's 2 changes that we should make. The first change is on line 256, and the next one's on line 257. So if we click here, it's going to bring us down here, and here you can see it wants us to set up the resource limits. So it actually gives us the configuration that we need to implement into our Kubernetes manifest file. So what you could do here is you could download this YAML file, or you could just copy and paste these changes directly onto GitHub, whatever way you want to implement it. The important part is it told us what the problem was, and it tells us what the solution is. In order to get past this control, you need to set your resource limits for your CPU as well as your memory. Now, I did speak with the ARMO team, and they did mention that they're going to be enhancing this specific feature in the future, where it's actually going to give you an exact diff of your current configuration and compare it to the suggested configuration. And I think maybe in the future, they may even allow you to automatically push a PR with this change. So a feature like that, I think, would be invaluable for a platform like this. So I hope that makes sense. Let's go ahead and head back into the ARMO platform. And now that we had a look at the compliance section, let's look at the vulnerability section. So if you go here, you can see my clusters have quite a few different vulnerabilities. And this is a big thing that happens in the security realm. Usually when you start running these tools, you're presented with a big long list of vulnerabilities. And what happens to a lot of teams is they have no idea where to start. You can see my clusters have 42 critical vulnerabilities and 352 high vulnerabilities. Now, what I like about this platform is they actually tell you which ones actually matter. So if we focus in on this section right here, you can see although there are 42 critical vulnerabilities, only 40 of them are actually fixable. So these are known vulnerabilities out in the wild, and actually only 40 of them have real fixes. So even if we wanted to, we couldn't fix all these different things. The other thing it tells you is only one of them is actually relevant inside my cluster. So this allows us to actually create a strategy around what we actually fix. If there's 42 critical vulnerabilities, but only one of them is actually relevant, let's go ahead and focus in on what's actually relevant, right? So what we can do here is add a filter and click relevant and specify that we're only interested in vulnerabilities that are relevant to our cluster. So you can see here, this drastically reduces my list. I have 3 different containers that are violating, and these bottom 2 only have 1 violation in high, whereas this specific container has 7 critical vulnerabilities. 1 of them is relevant, as well as 50 high. So I would probably want to focus my attention on fixing this specific resource. So I could go in here and see all the different vulnerabilities, and I could review them. And if I determine that, this isn't something that I'm going to worry about, this is not something that I think is relevant, I have the option to ignore it. But if I want additional information, you can click here and it goes into the actual CVE explanation and gives you all the information that you would need to know about this vulnerability. All right, so let's go ahead and head back to the ARMO platform. And I'm going to go into the RBAC Visualizer now. So if I go in here, I can select whichever cluster I want. I'm going to go into my lab cluster as it has a lot more permissions, so there's a lot more to visualize. So this is actually a pretty interesting feature that allows you to visualize the actual permissions in your Kubernetes cluster. So I'm just going to zoom in here, and you can see that we have the cluster administrator. So I can see all the different resources that have this cluster administrator cluster role attached to it. So I can see that Portainer has a service account and it's attached to cluster admin. I also have this Helm Trafic service account and another Helm Trafic service account attached to this cluster role. So it's just a really good way to visualize who's getting permissions on your cluster. Now, there isn't too much more I want to show on this particular feature. I just want everyone to know that this is available for you to view your actual permissions, and there's a bunch of different sorting you can do on it as well. But what I want to get into now is the registry scanning and the repository scanning and how we can implement Kubescape and ARMO in our CI/CD. So the first thing I'm going to go over is registry scanning, and this is something that's pretty simple to set up. You just go in here and then you add your actual registries that you want to monitor. So this is just a good way to hook up all your different registries and have them scanned periodically. So you can set up a cron schedule of how often your registry is scanned. I'm going to leave this one here because setting it up is super simple and something everyone should be able to do. What I want to focus on now is the repository scanning. So if I go here, you can see that I have two different repositories hooked up. And the way that you hook this up is by running the Kubescape scan command on the repository. So when I first set this up, I just grabbed this random GitHub repository, I scanned it, and you can see it returned me all the different resources. This next one is this Kubescape workflow repository that I created, and this one was actually triggered by a Github action. So I'm going to go in here, and you can see that it found a deployment.yaml file, and it has 7 controls that have passed, and 6 of them failed. 1 of them is a high severity, 4 of them are medium, and 1 of them is low. So this is the same thing that we looked at earlier when we ran the Kubescape scan command on the repository, but this one was triggered by a GitHub action. So in the description below, I actually have a link to my GitHub repository where I have this set up, and it has the complete workflow of setting this up. This is also available in the Kubescape documentation if you want to follow that, but this is a live example, and I'll be going through how we can actually configure this to make it work. So right now you can see my repository is in a passing state. So the Kubescape scans have passed. Let's go ahead and click this check mark. And if we go into the details, we can see the last run, and you can see it was successful. And if we actually go into this section of the CI workflow, we can see exactly what happened here. So if I scroll down, there's that 1 high severity, there's the 4 medium, and the 1 low, and my compliance score is 75. So a lot of you might be wondering, why is it passing? And that's because I set the threshold. You can see the exact command that it ran right up here. You can see the fail threshold is set to 70. So I'm at 75, so it's passing. And I set the severity threshold to critical. So there's no critical alarms, so it passes. Now, if I want to actually make a change to this configuration, all I need to do is go into my code, go into my workflows directory, and modify this GitHub action workflow. So this is straight from the Kubescape documentation. I just modified a few of the parameters here. So I'm going to show you how we can make it so this check is a little bit more strict. So I'm going to change it so if the severity threshold is anything that is high, then it's going to trigger a failure. I'm also going to say we need to pass at least with an 80% score. So right now we know we do have a high severity problem and our score is only 75. So when I make this change, the next build should fail. So let's go ahead and hit commit. And I'll just save this, and I'm going to give it 1 minute to run here, and then we'll go ahead and have a look at the results. Now, before I actually go and have a look at the results, there's one more thing I want to mention here that you may want to modify is this continue on error field. So if you have this set to true, it's always going to pass the workflow, but if you have it set to false, then you can make it so it actually fails the pipeline. So that's just another parameter that I want to mention in this actual workflow in case some of you are working on this and you're running into issues. So now that I've mentioned that, let's go ahead and go into our code. And there you have it. We can see the last one failed. So if we go here, we can have a look at the details. We can see that it failed. And that's because we have the high severity and we're only getting 75%. And now those parameters are set to 80 and the threshold is high. So this is the same way you would sort of implement it in all your different CI/CD pipelines. You would just have them run a command similar to this. With a GitHub action, it makes it a lot simpler to actually just take the action that Kubescape has built for us and then add the parameters that way. Now, another thing that you have here is you can see that it gives you a link to the actual repository scanning, and this is sent to the ARMO platform. So if we just click here, we can see the exact failures here, and now we have it available in the ARMO platform, and it's just an easier way to have a look at it. So if we want to see how we can actually fix this, we can hit fix, and let's see if we can filter on just high, and you can see all these ones have passed. This is the one high severity that is failing. So CPU and memory resources should have a limit, so similar to the one that I mentioned before. And if we go in here, we can see this is the suggested fix. So basically, what we want to do is set these resource limits in our actual YAML file. So I'm actually just going to copy this entire object and let's go into GitHub and make the fix and see if it now passes the pipeline. So if we go to deployments, we should just be able to edit this and then just do a paste. And we'll probably want to set some values here. They just have some placeholder values. This is something that you're supposed to come up with yourself. So we can set these pretty low. I'm just going to do 0.5 of the CPU, and then let's go 256 MI. So I'm going to go ahead and commit these changes right to the main branch, and let's go ahead and see if the CI/CD passes. So I'll head on back here. We can see that it's going through the workflow, and we'll just go watch it in real time, and I'll speed this up for the people watching at home. And there we have it. It passed pretty quickly here. So if we click this, and then we have a look at the run Kubescape, we can see that we no longer have that high severity. We've taken care of it. So now our pipeline is passing. All right, so I hope that makes sense. If you want access to this GitHub action, it's in the description below, so you can check out my repository and have a look at my runs, and hopefully that'll help you when you go ahead and set it up for yourself. Now, there's at least 2 more things I want to show in the actual platform, so let's head back here, because these are really cool features. So if we go down to the settings, one thing we can do is we can set up our own framework and we can set up our own controls. So if we go to frameworks here, you can see we have all the different frameworks that come with Kubescape and ARMO, but at the very bottom here, you can see that I created my own custom framework. So you create your own custom framework just by going new framework, and then you add some controls to it. So if you have a look here, I have one called production ready. And this is just the controls that I think would be applicable to my Kubernetes cluster. So I just put in the 3 most important controls that I think are important to me. So you can see that I have the control exec into container, the resource limits, and non-root containers. So if I go down to my compliance tab, I can actually filter on my clusters using this framework. So I can choose it down here and then just focus in on it. And you can see that my production cluster is not production ready because the resource limits has not been set. So this is a good example of something you could do. Now, if you want to create your own controls, that's something I do recommend. So if you go back to settings, you can see that underneath the frameworks button, you have this controls. And if you go here, you can create your own control. So let's go ahead and do that together here. And you have a lot of different options here. This looks a lot more complicated than it actually is. Basically, you give it a control name. So I'm going to say replicas must be 2, and I'm not sure if it's going to allow spaces, but I think that should be okay. But in this section, we make a wish, and basically you just explain in plain English what you think the control should be, and it's going to go ahead and create that control. So the disclaimer is it's provided by GPT-3. Basically, it's using the GPT engine to automatically create this control for you. So let's see how good this actually is. I'm going to say replicas must always be set to 2 or more. So basically, for any of my deployments, anything that has like a replica, I want to make sure that someone needs to specify 2 or more. We don't want replicas ever set to just 1 because we want some redundancy with our pods. So I'm going to go ahead and hit generate control and see what it comes up with here. And you can see that it created our control here. So you can see we can download this control, or you can just copy and paste this control. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this down to a local file, and I'm going to show you how you can use this control that we created using Kubescape, and we're going to run that against our YAML file. Alright, so I've gone ahead and done that. So I'm in this Kubescape workflow directory again, where I have my basic YAML file. You can see this YAML file has 3 replicas, so it should be compliant. And then I just ran this command, basically Kubescape scan control. I specified that control name for the control that I created. And then I just copy and pasted that text into this control.json. You can see it went through and it scanned that specific control, and you can see the control name replicas must be 2, failed resources 0, all resources 1, so my resource is compliant. So this is just a quick example of how you can create your own controls, so hopefully that was helpful. Alright, so that's your tutorial on Kubescape and ARMO. I hope the video was helpful, and I hope you use it to make those Kubernetes clusters more secure. If you have any questions about anything I discussed, just leave a comment down below and I'll try to get back to you. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video.